All right, starting Raymond off with some external glenohumeral rotation with a weight that is substantial but not too heavy. We want the weight to be light enough that his deeper rotator cuff level tissues and capsular tissues are responding to this weight, but we don't want a weight that's so heavy that all of the overlying musculature jumps in to try to assist. We want him to be able to relax his pecs, relax some of the larger, more superficial tissues. And doing these isometric holds in glenohumeral external rotation is going to bias adaptation in the connective tissues rather than the musculature. So we're building the scaffolding or the structure that we can then lay muscle protein tissues on top of. And I had Raymond switch to some bilateral work with opposite sides doing opposite things, going into external internal rotation. Ideally, I'd like for his elbows to be moving around a little bit less, but Raymond is at the beginning of his strength and conditioning journey with functional range conditioning. And so I'm not getting too nitpicky. In general, with fitness, some is going to be better than none, and more is going to be better than less. So as long as he's moving with a purpose and moving with intention, I am pleased. So now we've got him in glenohumeral external rotation. For those who don't know, glenohumeral simply means the shoulder. Okay, so now we have Raymond pronating and supinating while staying in that glenohumeral external rotation position. So essentially his shoulder joint is more or less static in an isometric hold, an isometric contraction, while he rotates at the elbow. So that's basically the radius rotating in the annular ligament. And now he's back to some up-down stuff, which is going to also work the muscles as well as the connective tissue. So in general, when Raymond slows down and does these things more deliberately, I'm going to be happier as a trainer because really he needs to remodel a lot of his connective tissues. Raymond is familiar with training that targets the muscles, and if he would do a little more training that targets simply the connective tissues, he would have a lot more shoulder to work with. He's had so much trauma to his shoulders that there must be quite a bit of fibrosis in there. Now we've got a hold, an isometric hold in internal rotation, and that's as long as he can go. Back to external rotation. So this is just time under tension. We're racking up literal minutes. And also I told him to gently just lift his elbows off the pads this time. So he's in external rotation, he's holding external rotation, and then he's also doing a very little bit of humeral adduction. So pulling his elbows horizontally towards his center line, which is also going to activate the overlying pec musculature. It's a complicated move, and he's doing it quite well. And he really wants to go up because he's just so familiar with lifting weights. Back into an internal rotation isometric hold. You just do these all day. When you do stuff like this for 3 to 6 months, you're going to see major changes in how your shoulder performs, looks, and feels. There we go. Okay, now we've got Raymond on one of the most incredible exercises in the history of mankind. which is just hanging. So I'm having him do some single arm hanging, which we're then going to follow up with some double arm hanging. And in this first set, I'm having him just stay more or less static. This was his natural inclination. And as a coach, I'm not going to tell him to do differently, because oftentimes where people start with exercise and with their form is exactly where they need to be, based on their prerequisites, how their tissues are operating, how much they practice certain movements over the course of their lives recently. Okay, into some double arm hanging. Everybody should have the ability to hang. Single arm hanging. And now, with the use of the box, Raymond is rotating. So he's supporting some of his body weight through his feet, and he's rotating through that shoulder joint. Okay? So the glenohumeral joint is a joint of rotation. It's a ball and socket joint. There's a lot of rotation that happens in that joint. In fact, some people would say that rotation is the most important movement of the glenohumeral joint. All right, we're switching to the other arm here. Okay, so I've got Raymond's elbow on my knee. I'm creating a little shelf with my knee. Got our up-down table. And it looks like I am feeling around for where I can feel restrictions. I'm taking his arm into external rotation until he feels a good stretch, and then I'm going to just block him there. And we're either doing a passive hold, or he's pressing up into my elbow, so he's trying to internally rotate while I'm holding him in his deepest externally rotated position, deepest comfortable externally rotated position. Looks like we're having a nice little discussion about something. So I'm going to prime the joint by having him passively stretch for about 2 minutes. Now, he did a little bit of external rotation with the dumbbells downstairs on the floor with the blue pads. That's how we started the video. But we are going to do a little bit of a passive stretch here, about 2 minutes of passive stretching, and then he's going to press up into my elbow. He's going to press up about 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds. There's a big range of time in which he can press up. Basically, we're looking for like 20, 40, 60% effort over the course of, let's just say, 40 seconds. Okay, and now I'm going to have him press his wrist down towards the ground. Okay, so now we have Raymond's arm in a flexed position, and I'm setting him up here. It's important to work on whatever you're working on. So we're working on external rotation of his glenohumeral joint, but it's important to do that in multiple positions, right? Because external rotation isn't just always external rotation. If the arm is flexed and doing external rotation, that's a lot different than if the arm is extended and doing external rotation. So it looks like I'm holding his arm in external rotation, and I'm having him try to internally rotate against my held pressure. And now we're going to take Raymond's arm into an even greater flexed position, and still holding it in external rotation, but now his arm is coming up closer to the overhead position, and I'm pressing his arm, I'm externally rotating his arm to tolerance, and I'm having him try to internally rotate, creating an intense Pales contraction. We haven't really done much rails at all. Okay, now I'm having him do rails, it looks like. Oh, look at me. I'm trying to figure out my hold because I want to push his arm into internal rotation. And that's as far as it goes. That's as far as it goes into internal rotation. Oh, maybe a little bit farther. And now I'm having him press against me. So now he's trying to externally rotate out of his maximal internally rotated position. And you can see some shaking going on here. Very valuable work for him to go into internal rotation and then use his connective tissues there. And we are using the connective tissues when we load him up like that. Okay, we're holding him in internal rotation, asking him to try and externally rotate. You notice his shoulder joint does not want to really segment well. It's like an all or nothing thing where the glenohumeral joint has to pop up towards the ceiling in this position. This is what we're trying to get him out of or have the option to not do. So I'm holding him in internal rotation. Now I'm going to slowly pales contraction. Boom, internally rotate. There's that beautiful pales. Okay. Alrighty, so now I'm taking his arm. Now he's in that flexion position, and I'm taking him back into external rotation. This is where the magic happens when you go and do these interventions multiple times in a session. So you get, multiple minutes of time under tension in external rotation, your deepest externally rotated position, and then you go right into multiple minutes of time under tension in your deepest internally rotated position, and then you go back to external rotation, and then you go back to internal rotation. That's when your joint really starts to wake up, and he's got to move back because I'm sure he's trying to get the blood flow back in there.